What is Freemasonry? Why is it so dangerous? And most importantly, how can we protect our loved ones from entering the craft? Stay with us. Catholic Parents Online is next. Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a program where we explore the issues Catholic parents face while raising their children. I'm your host, Colleen Perfect. We've all heard the terms One World Order, New Age Movement, and New World Order. But did you know about their connection with Freemasonry? Joining me again to help unveil the truth about Freemasonry is Mary Therese Helmueller. Mary is a nurse specializing in critical care, and she is also a certified legal nurse consultant. She is the founder and CEO of Guadalupe Travel Incorporated, providing pilgrimages to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City for the past 24 years. Mary speaks the Spanish language fluently and has worked in the missions of Brazil, Mexico, and Guatemala. I'm very grateful to Mary Therese for her willingness to share her wealth of knowledge on the secret society called Freemasonry. Thank you so much for being here, Mary.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege.
Oh, I'm very grateful
it's
you're
an
here.
honor.
And we do have a lot to cover, so I'm going to start right
do.
out by asking you just what is Freemasonry?
Well, Freemasonry, just briefly, a brief description of it, is that it's the largest international secret society. It claims that it embraces all different types of religions and faiths, only secretly to negate them, nullify them, and actually destroy them. Their basic principle is naturalism. That's their doctrine.
Could you explain what naturalism is?
Naturalism is human nature. They believe human nature and human reason should rule all things, should be the judge and measure of all things. So that leaves out God, it leaves out divine intervention, it leaves out any kind of inspiration, divine inspiration. So basically what they are doing is leaving God out. They're putting themselves up as God, or as gods, so to speak. So basically, logically, the order is, if man is the judge and ruler of all things, then there is no God. So, and then it is, man is God. That's how it progresses in Freemasonry. So it is a diabolical religion, and that man is God is the old ancient deception of Satan, of Lucifer from the very beginning.
Right.
So when that is proclaimed and when that is believed, then it unleashes all kinds of things. Just a lust of money, a lust of power, a lust of sex. I mean, just unleashes an unbelievable amount of evil. So Freemasonry is dangerous, and it is international, and it is an organization, a religion that is out to rule the world. Its main goal is to destroy the Catholic Church and Christian societies, socioeconomic societies, and replace them with a social structure that is based on naturalism. So their goal is one world order, and their main communication is called the New Age, and the highest level in the Scottish Rite is the 33rd degree level, and that's called the New Age. And I remember back in college, I was seeing these terms, New Age, New Age movement. I didn't know what it was about, but I knew something was terribly wrong. And it wasn't until traveling all over the world and studying history of the different revolutions that have taken place that I realized the influence of Masonry and who is behind the one world government, the one world order, the New World Order, the New Age movement. It's all the code words for Freemasonry. So are there good people that belong in Freemasonry? I believe they come to Freemasonry many times because maybe they need a fraternity, or they need some brotherly love, like they like to quote, and like they so much all over the internet and many of the publications, they like to say it's a brotherly fraternity. And
they do
so
much good work.
And they do, yes, the Shriners Hospitals. But all of that is a smoke screen, and that is to, in the outer level, like for us, to make it look like it is good, and to screen it from what it really is. It is a diabolical, satanic religion, with many of its ceremonies and practices just outrightly invoking and chanting Satan. So it is very frightening. There were good people. If you go online, and you know, Freemasons like to say that George Washington was a Mason.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Benjamin Franklin was a Mason. But you will never hear them claim that also Lenin was a Mason. Karl Marx was a Mason. Trotsky was a Mason. Mussolini was a Mason. And also the ruler in Mexico during the Great Persecution was President Calles, a Mason. So, I mean, you could go down the list, you know, and then the Freemasons will say, well, there's always good and bad in every religion and every cult, you know, in every society. But the difference is the Masons, Lenin, Stalin, Karl Marx, all these people were actually living up to what Masonry teaches, what Masonry is. Pure naturalism. God is man, and it unleashes a terrible persecution upon the Catholic Church, which is one of their main goals, is to destroy the Catholic Church. So that is the reason why the popes over the years have made statements and documents. There's about 17 main principal documents written about Freemasonry, the dangers of Freemasonry, and also it is a grave mortal sin to join the Freemasonry. So in light of that, because it is diabolical in nature and man is not God.
Well, Mary, if it's a secret society, how do you know so much about it? How did you
learn
learn about it?
It is amazing, I must say. It is very amazing.
I know there's a lot out there on the internet about it, but it's only what they want you to read.
And many times that is the case. However, in traveling, it was so interesting because going to Mexico and bringing pilgrimages for over 25 years, you know, in Mexico, and then also I conducted pilgrimages in France and Ireland, and all the different various countries. And it was very interesting because you study the history and you study the revolutions, and one was the same. It was like I could repeat word for word what would happen next, what happened, what happened, just by knowing the history of what happened in Mexico. And so I said, okay, I know that the author of these revolutions was Satan, was Lucifer, definitely, but what political organization is behind this, because it is so orchestrated. It can't be by chance. It just can't be by chance. It is so orchestrated and so similar, whether you're talking about France, Spain, what happened in Italy, what happened in Russia, what happened in Mexico. It was just, it's so widespread. And so I started on a little search, and with Mexico, you know, asking people, you know, about their government, and also in Ireland and all these other countries when I'd visit. And there was a lot of fear amongst the people when they would talk about Freemasonry as the background of this. So it's not just me that's saying this. This is people in their own countries that are saying that Freemasonry is the basis of these revolutions. And when you look at it, what does a Masonic revolution look like? It looks like the Revolution, the French Revolution. It looks like the Spanish Revolution. It looks like the Mexico Revolution. It looks like what happened in Russia. I mean, people don't realize, they haven't studied the history. And so that's what got my curiosity up. And so looking into Mexico, what happened? Mexico, you know, when it was founded under Catholic Spain, it had the first printing press. It had the first university long before Yale, long before even the United States was founded. Amazing. Natural resources, wealthy country. Why did that not become a superpower?
Yes.
Why? Because they were well on the way, you know, as far as intellectually and all their natural resources. Well, when Mexico separated from Spain in 1810, from the time of 1810 up until the reform laws of Benito Juarez, there was one coup after another, one bloodbath, one assassination. When you study the Mexican history, there was so much unpeace and unsettlement throughout the country. And when the reform laws came, that was really the Masonic laws coming into place into Mexico. And then it was the Constitution of 1917 in Mexico and the coming of Plutarco Calles that ruled Mexico in the 1920s. And he was so brutal, they said he was a mixture between Stalin and Lenin.
Wow.
In his persecution that he unleashed against the Catholics. And to give you an idea, of this persecution, what they did is they would, when they came into Mexico, into the government, they made marriage, they would not recognize marriages by church weddings. Oh. You had to be married by the JP. They do not, and to this day, they do not recognize church weddings. People don't realize, okay? So what else happened? They brought in pornography. They brought in sex education into the schools to demoralize the youth and to take control of the minds of the youth. It's very interesting to read several of the books of people who had fled Mexico during the persecution. Some of these books called No God Next Door, Blood-Drenched Altars, Mexican Martyrdom. It was fascinating when I picked up these books. And by the way, what validated it for me in many sense was in 1991, it was still illegal to carry blood-drenched altars, which was the history of Mexico and the Masonic Revolution, on you.
Really?
If you were found to have this book on you in Mexico, you could be thrown in jail.
Oh my heavens.
In 1991.
Wow, that wasn't that long ago.
And so even up until 1991, it was illegal for the priests to wear the Roman collars. So there were so many laws that were enacted. The government took over schools, took over health care. So the nationalized health care, public school system. They totally wiped out the private schools of the religious orders there in Mexico. They closed the churches. People were martyred if they were found practicing their faith. And in fact, one church in Mexico City, people were gathered for Mass. The army came in and just fired and shot everybody. Oh. So it was very brutal. It was really Satan unleashed in Mexico. And many Americans do not realize the great persecution that took place in the early 1920s up till about 1945 in Mexico, and it was the Masonic Revolution. So this is what Masonry looks like: intolerance for the Catholic Church, wanting to destroy the Catholic Church.
Mary Therese, who would say, if they don't know it's the Freemasons doing that, who would say, what would they say? It's just the government?
The government. You know, that's a good question, Colleen. You know, I have a lot of friends who will say, well, look, Mexico, you know, the population is primarily Catholic. Look at how corrupt it is, so it's the Catholic Church. No, it is not the Catholic Church that runs Mexico. It is the Freemasons that run Mexico. You have to be a Mason to even hold office in Mexico.
It's obvious if the Catholic Church was running it, they wouldn't be closing Catholic schools, and they wouldn't say you can't get married in a church.
But most of the world, most of society here does not even know of that persecution that took place in Mexico, and they do not know that history. So, yes, it is run by the Masons in Mexico, yet to this day. So it's only since 1991 that some of the laws have been lifted, and it's been since the Holy Father Pope John Paul II had made a few visits to Mexico. And in fact, that was the first pope that ever came to Mexico. And before that time, Mexico had broken ties completely with the Vatican for over like 125 years. Wow. So it was very anti-Catholic and still remains anti-Catholic to a certain point. Give you an idea, I want to share a few stories of some of my heroes in Mexico and the martyrs. And one is a little boy, Jose Luis. He was 10 years old. And he was helping the Cristeros. The Cristeros was a movement that was fighting. They were fighting this, the government and this religious persecution. So it was men of great honor and faith that were hiding in the hills. And so this little boy, Jose Luis went into the hills and talked to the general and said, please let me join you. I want to be a part of this movement. And the general said, no, you're much too young. A boy cannot serve in this. It's too dangerous. And he pleaded with the general until the general finally gave in and said, okay, I'll give you the job of watering the horses, taking care of our horses. So Jose Luis was so excited and so proud of this position that he held, that he was helping the Cristeros, the men who were defending the faith in Mexico. So what happens one day, the whole army is taken by the government officials, by the police in Mexico. The Cristeros are martyred, but little Jose Luis, they didn't know what to do. He was a boy, he was 10 years old. And so they put him in prison. And in this little town in the northern section of Mexico, the governor was actually the godfather of little Jose Luis. But nonetheless, the godfather was also a Mason, and he would come in every day into prison and say, you deny Christ the King. See, they have a problem with the authority of Christ the King because man is God. Man is king, man rules, man is the judge, the supreme judge. So the little boy would not deny Christ the King. And so one day, Godfather came in and said, you deny Christ the King. Little boy would not. They burned the skin off the feet of the little boy. Oh. They made him walk through the town, his mother behind. Oh. They made him dig his grave, stand in front of his grave, in front of a firing squad, and they said, you deny Christ the King. But before you heard the shots, you heard the mother crying over the crowd. Son, never deny Christ the King, for a crown of glory waits for you in heaven. And with that, they shot him. Oh, this is the brutality. It was not just, I mean, it was bad enough, priests and religious in Mexico. No, many laity, millions of people would not give up their faith in Mexico, and they were martyred. We'll never know how many saints and martyrs are there in Mexico. So this is actually a Masonic government unleashed in its purest form. And so you also have the story of another hero of mine, which is Padre Pro. And his feast day is coming up November 23rd. And Padre Pro is a beautiful example of someone who would not deny Christ the King and who would persevere in his faith. So this priest, he was exiled as a seminarian and actually ordained in Belgium. But he was sent back to Mexico because he was so poor in health that his officials thought that, oh, going back home, seeing his family, getting back to his home country would restore his health. Little did they really know what was happening in Mexico at that time because it was illegal to practice your faith. The churches were closed, the schools were closed, you know, it was the Masonic Revolution. So anyways, Padre Pro enters the U.S. secretly, disguised, and he administers to people for about a good year and a half. And he would take different costumes. He'd disguise himself one time as a street in Mexico City. He would have communion stations where he would go and he would, you know, give the Holy Communion to the Catholics. He would also celebrate Mass in secret places. And he was so witty and so humorous in many of the time, in the ways that he would do this. He outwitted the police, that it made the police look foolish in Mexico, and it made Calles extremely angry, extremely angry, because it was making a fool out of the government, because he would escape each time, and you know, he'd have a different disguise. So he's one of my heroes in Mexico. Eventually he was captured, and he was martyred. He was shot before a firing squad, and he was only 2 years a priest, basically, and just about a year and a half in Mexico, back in his home country. But nonetheless, when he was in prison, he had the prisoners singing Viva Cristo Rey, songs to Our Lady, to our Lord. They wrote on the walls, Viva Cristo Rey. He heard the last confessions of many of the prisoners there. And then when he was brought out to the firing squad, he held out his arms and said, Viva Cristo Rey. and he fell in the sign of a cross.
Oh.
So he's a beautiful example of that time of the martyrs of Mexico and the strength to withstand this Masonic government. So learning and studying about this government, then, you know, I was taking pilgrimages to Ireland, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing again. But it was in a different way. It was the potato famine, and it was, oh, the Irish, you know, were starving because the potato famine failed. And I went, wait a minute, you don't live on a potato, you know. And I just started thinking, no, the only person I know that could live on a potato was St. John Vianney. so anyways, nonetheless, you know, that got me going and asking questions. And so in Killarney, I took a little buggy ride. I would ask different guides and different people, you know, about the history and what happened during the potato famine and the persecution, the religious persecution in Ireland. And you know, it's always the same feeling, this hush up. Well, you know, let's go where there's nobody can hear us. Let's go to the woods. Let's go to the mountains. Let's go, you know, somewhere where nobody can hear us. So there was that real fear element. Yeah. It was very interesting. And they all, you know, they all came with the same answer. It was the Masonic influence and the persecution in Ireland. There was food in Ireland, and that's well documented now, of course. There was plenty of food, but it was being shipped over to England. And you could have the food and you could have the meat if you denied your faith. Kind of like in Mexico. You deny Christ the King. No. So the Irish said no to that. So they died in the millions. I mean, we'll never know either, all the martyrs of Ireland.
Those are my ancestors.
I know, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful heritage. But, you know, it's again, a land of saints and martyrs for the faith. Right. And so instead of giving up their faith, they died. You know, they were eating grass or eating whatever they could, you know, but they were starving. So it was very interesting because some of the older people that I talked to in Killarney and other places in Ireland, they'd say, yes, they said there was food in the main squares and the main areas, you know, and today they even have the names, the Catholic names, the people that gave up their faith are called the supers. It's very interesting because they took the soup, they took the meat and the soup, they denied their faith. So they're still known as the supers. It's very interesting, you know, as far as the history of what happened there. But it is documented today that there was plenty of food in Ireland, and that was a genocide.
Of course.
Isn't that interesting? And then it even brought it closer when I went to Northern Ireland. You know, in Southern Ireland, I didn't see any Masonic lodges. As soon as I got into Armagh, which is like the main city in Northern Ireland, one of the main cities in Northern Ireland, you're greeted with an archway with all the Masonic symbols. So it's very interesting because you have the skull and bones, you have, you know, the G, you have all the different Masonic symbols. And as a group on a pilgrimage, we would go into a restaurant, and that restaurant was so fearful of us because we were Catholics and our priests had Roman collars on, they locked the doors.
Oh my goodness,
for us.
Really?
And this was just a few years back. This was maybe at the most 10 years ago in Northern Ireland.
Really?
And they were trying to protect us. So it became very clear to me the struggle isn't so much Protestant Catholicism, it is Freemasonry.
Yes.
And what that means and how that unleashes against Catholicism. Because the people in the restaurant were trying to protect us by locking us in. Isn't that very interesting?
That is
and that's just 10 years ago. But I wouldn't know this information without talking or without visiting these places and asking questions and studying the history and visiting the people.
Undercover investigator, weren't you?
So the same story is told over and over and over with these religious persecutions. And it is the church is closed, is outlawed, the priests are hung, they are shot. Many of the sisters and religious were guillotined in the French Revolution. And you know, the cry in the French Revolution, which people aren't really familiar with, was to overthrow the crown and the altar. So the altar was Catholicism.
Okay, sure.
So then the cry for the Catholics was all for the crown or all for you know, the altar, you know. So, but many people were martyred in the French Revolution in the same way, and how, you know, you can read about it in the life of Saint John Vianney. And that's reading his big life. It's a big book like this. Get a hold of that, and it goes through what it was like in the Masonic Revolution, the French Revolution. So it's very interesting to study history, and you can easily, I started putting pieces together, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a common thread. It's the common denominator. It cannot be denied. But of course, it's not being taught.
Well, people are fearful.
And very fearful about speaking out. In fact, I had people here, you know, in other states when they knew we were doing this program. They said, "Aren't you afraid?" Yeah,
of course. That's why I'm so grateful to you too.
Yes, and different religious orders that are praying at this very moment for us, for our safety. So it is nothing, you know, to play with. The Masonic, you know.
But
lodge.
it has to be told. It has to be told. It's demonic, and the devil is deceptive, and we are going to expose it.
Exactly.
That's what we're about too. Catholic Parents Online is about the truth.
And the only way that really can protect yourself is to really know your enemy.
That's right.
I don't like to give a lot of time to the occult, because this is really what it is. This is the occult. And I don't like to give a lot of time, but people need to know the basics. In order to protect themselves and their families.
Yes. And we have so much more to cover. That's why we decided to do 2 shows on this, which is excellent because you have so much more to tell us.
Yes, I do.
So people will be filled in on a lot more details. So Mary, thank you again. I know this is not easy.
Much. No, it's difficult to talk about. There's so much.
We have prayed, and we've prayed to St. Michael, and we're just going to keep ourselves steeped in prayer and holy water.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you.
This has been an amazing and revealing program on Freemasonry. I'm sure you won't want to miss part 2, where we will look at the history and the structure of Freemasonry, its symbols, the first 3 oaths members must take, a Masonic document called the Alta Vendita, and the New Age and One World Order. Most importantly, we will learn how we can protect ourselves and our families. Thanks for watching, and God bless you and yours. What is Freemasonry? Why is it so dangerous? And most importantly, how can we protect our loved ones from entering the craft? Stay with us. Catholic Parents Online is next. Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a program where we explore the issues Catholic parents face while raising their children. I'm your host, Colleen Perfect. In this program, Part 2, we will look at the history and structure of Freemasonry, its symbols, the first 3 oaths the members must take, a Masonic document called the Alta Vendita, and the New Age and One World Order. Most importantly, we will learn how we can protect ourselves and our families. Joining me again to help unveil the truth about Freemasonry is Mary Therese Helmueller. Mary is a nurse specializing in critical care, and she is also a certified legal nurse consultant. She is the founder and CEO of Guadalupe Travel and she provides pilgrimages to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico for the past 24 years. Mary speaks the Spanish language fluently and has worked in the missions of Brazil, Mexico, and Guatemala. I'm very grateful to Mary Therese for her willingness to share her wealth of knowledge on the secret society called Freemasonry. Welcome back, Mary.
Oh, thank you, Colleen.
Well,
it's
we had
privilege,
quite a program one.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if before we go into the second program, if you could just give us a little bit of a recap.
Brief synopsis, sure. What is Freemasonry? Freemasonry is an international society. It is one of the largest international secret societies. It is Satanic in nature. It is based upon naturalism, which says man is God. So it puts man up as a supreme being and judge and measure of all things rather than God. So man is God, and it is an international organization that its main goal is to have world domination, one world order, and to bring about this new society in which naturalism, where man is God.
Okay, well, Mary, you've called this a secret society, but also a religion.
That's correct.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Yes, it is a religion. It is not just a simple fraternity or a fun organization that many people tend to think of them as. It is definitely a religion. And why I say this is because, a fraternity or a society in general does not build temples and does not worship in shrines or have their meetings in shrines or temples. They don't have altars, which are the center of, the activity in the shrine, kneelers where they kneel, ceremonies where they invoke different beings, and it becomes very diabolical at the very top. When you know the different levels, even just the names of the different levels give you an idea of the diabolical nature of this. Like Prince of Jerusalem is one of the levels. Oh. Prince of the Tabernacle is another level. Prince of Mercy. What a mockery. Because we know who the Prince of Mercy is.
That's right.
And it is not a level in Freemasonry. So it is set up to actually make a mockery out of Christ and his church. And their main goal is to destroy the Catholic Church, to bring it down, and to usher in this one world order.
So Mary, how did the secret society get its name, and are there other names that it goes by?
That's a good question, Colleen. It was back in the medieval times, when Masons were building cathedrals and castles. They would have their own little symbol that they would etch into the stone, and many of these symbols, of course, were symbols of their trade. They met in lodges, and they formed unions.
Okay.
So actually it was like a union that they formed, and the meeting place was the lodge. But what happened after the Protestant Reformation, there was less need for these Masons, and so they started accepting other people that were not true Masons, more philosophical individuals, into these unions and into the lodge. And that's how it evolved then to the Masonic Lodge that we know today. In fact, the 4 remaining lodges in England joined together in 1717 to form the Grand Lodge of England. And that is the basis for the Freemasonry that we see today.
And then other names that it goes by?
Other names, thank you, yes. Other names, the craft. A lot of people aren't familiar with that term.
I wasn't.
Sometimes you'll just hear people mention the lodge. Illuminati is one that's very popular or common in Europe. Latin America, it's Illuminari, which is very interesting because Lucifer, is the angel of light that actually said, I will not serve God. And so he was cast down. And so Illuminati refers to light, and the Luminari refers to light. It's very interesting.
It is.
And
it's certainly telling.
And actually, yes. And actually, when the candidates come to the lodge, they are told to disregard their previous teaching and other faiths. See, it's interesting because when they come to the lodge will say, oh yes, we embrace Islam, we embrace Catholicism, we embrace Protestantism, we embrace Hindu, all the different faiths, but they don't. They do not. Ultimately, their goal is to annihilate them, destroy them. And it's through their lessons and through their studies that they mock these faiths. But the ultimate one is the Catholic Church, because they know, Satan knows, honestly, who, where Christ is, where the true church is,
Right.
And so most of the thrust over the years has been to attack the Catholic Church, because that is the true presence of Christ.
Well, Mary, are there different types of lodges, Masonic lodges?
There are, and there's a lot of misunderstanding, and even on one of the websites I was reading, I think it was a Mason in one of the earlier levels, he was saying, I'm so confused.
Oh, really?
Believe you me, it is very confusing. But you have basically the Blue Lodge. The Blue Lodge has the 3 primary levels of Masonry, 1, 2, and 3. You cannot go on to any of the other rites. You have the Scottish Rite and you have the York Rite. Those are branches that come off from the Blue Lodge. You must complete the Grand Master, the 3rd level of the Blue Lodge, before you can go off to those other levels. And that's where it becomes more and more diabolical. That's where you have the levels called the Prince of the Tabernacle, Prince of Jerusalem, Prince of Mercy. You can see very clearly how diabolical this is, because that is no prince. It's not our prince. It's not Jesus Christ. It's not our faith. But that's where it becomes very evident in those levels. So yes, those are the basic 3 levels of the Masons. But then, the different names, going back to names of the lodge or Masonry, you have Shriners, and people don't realize the Shriners are also a level of the lodge or part of the lodge, and typically it's very high on up in the lodge, and that's the Arab.
People are just so they don't understand, because they think Shriners, that's a circus. We bring our children
fun,
there.
Yes, fun, and they have.
But it is so deceptive.
Yes, and yes, they have. They do good works, but again, that's that smoke screen to really veil the true nature of Masonry, the diabolical nature. So people are led to believe that, yes, this is a very good organization. Yes, it is based on Christianity, or it's based on the Quran, or it's based on whatever holy book. They will play whatever. They will use whatever religion that candidate is. And they will take oaths on that holy book. But the ultimate goal of Masonry is then to negate all the teachings of that holy book. Because really they're out to replace that religion with the religion of Freemasonry and naturalism.
So they're pretty much brainwashing people
right
out of
Absolutely, and it's a subtle, gradual. However, many people say, oh, the first 3 levels, those people really don't understand what they're joining. But from what I've read, you have to know that something isn't right. Even in the very first 3 levels, you're told to disregard your religion. I mean, the come on is, we're brotherly love and we embrace all religions and all faiths, but yet when they're there, disregard your previous teachings, your religion, and because you are actually coming out of darkness and into the light of fellowship. That is exactly what they are told. So it's very interesting, because number 1, that would put my alarms up. Something isn't right with this, But the oaths that they take, are very specific. They are they take oaths of obedience. I mean, it is very strict obedience, and it's under penalty of death. And some of the oaths, it includes that if they would reveal any of the secrets, that their tongue would be cut out of their mouth, their throat would be slit. Very violent type of oaths. And another one is that their chest would be opened and their beating heart plucked out of their chest and placed upon the highest pinnacle.
Why would anybody want to take that oath when they see it and read it? I mean, that's bizarre. You'd think they'd run for the hills.
It's and that is just a glimpse of the diabolical nature of Freemasonry. When you just take a look, we don't have to know everything, and I don't know everything about Masonry, obviously. And one will probably never know until you're in the inner depths and the inner circles of Masonry. But what we do see, you can make a judgment. You can say,
Right.
yes, this is clearly not Christian. This is
That's right.
clearly diabolical.
That's right.
So it is quite easy that way. But they do throw out all the other philanthropy and all the good things that they do as a smokescreen to lure people in and to deceive them. Freemasonry is a master at deception. But you know where that comes from? That comes from Lucifer. That comes from Satan.
Right.
He is the ultimate
Right.
deceptor.
So another interesting aspect are the symbols. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Symbols, there are so many symbols.
And people are, I'm sure, have seen the symbols.
Symbols, you know, the most common one is the G with a compass, and then you have a ruler, you know, in the form of a V. And initially, the candidate is told that that stands for God, you know, God of the universe. And then later on, it stands for geometry, which I started to laugh because who would build a shrine or a temple and who would have these elaborate ceremonies and things for geometry?
That's right. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. So, but the deception is that they don't know until the higher levels that basically what it is the generative power. G is generative, and it refers to the male organ quite plainly, and speaking very, very frank with you. A lot of the symbolism is very sexual. You're dealing with naturalism. You're dealing with paganism and the occult. And so many of the symbols are phallic, what we call phallic. They have another visual connotation, a sexual connotation.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's
It ties
interesting.
right in with this whole demonic.
Right, and you know the other symbols, the all-seeing eye comes from Egypt. Basically, you have all kinds of things, pyramids. You have obelisks as signs, you know, of Freemasonry. The torch is the light of Lucifer. Per one of the Masons themselves, it was a quote unquote, and I forget who, I forget the name at this point, but anyways, it was the torch of Lucifer. So it's very interesting. Everything is seen in a different way.
It sure is.
Yeah, for the common person, you wouldn't see it that way, but ultimately, when you get up into the upper levels, it is all twisted, and it's a mire, and it is satanic.
And they make it more, they take all these issues, make them very sinful.
And
like you say, pornography and lust.
Exactly. And in many of their ceremonies, there's nudity. In the third degree, which is the top of the Blue Lodge, when they're taking their oath and the candidate is taking their oath, he has to strip down to his shorts, bare-chested. He puts a rope around his body. They blindfold him. It's very interesting, but it even gets worse. It progresses even worse up in the upper levels, even to a point where their ceremonies are have human sacrifice at the very top levels.
Oh, wow.
Is what I'm told, which is a real eye-opener. So I didn't want to believe it, but it was confirmed in one of my own personal experiences, which I'll share later.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, can you explain what the Alta Vendita is?
The Alta Vendita was a document. It was a Masonic document that was drawn up, I think it was 1800s. But it was basically Freemasonry knew that they couldn't destroy the church completely. They had tried, but they could not completely destroy the church. So what they changed their form. What they said then we need to do is infiltrate it. So we're going to infiltrate it, corrupt it from within to bring it down. And then that will ultimately spread out to society, and it'll bring about the one world order, the New Age, you know, their whole society based on naturalism.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it was several popes. It was actually Pope Pius IX and Pope Pius XII that had asked for that to be published, and asked that the people knew about this, you know, in a widespread way, because you can't fight an enemy unless you know the enemy.
That's right.
I mean, you do have to know to a certain degree. I don't like spending a lot of time on the occult, which is Freemasonry. I don't like spending a lot of time, but you need to spend enough time that you know your enemy, so that you don't get trapped into the deception.
That's right.
Because it is so twisted, and and so powerful. So the popes were hoping that this would be widespread, and unfortunately it was not. And people really aren't aware of it. But you can get it. John Vanari has a book published, and you can get it now. There's a lot of information out there. You really have to search and keep in mind, you know, because there's a lot of also propaganda out there that just says that this is a wonderful brotherhood, beautiful society. So.
Well, Mary, what do you mean by Masonic changes in society?
Well, Masonic changes in society, you bring in pornography.
Definitely, yeah.
Bring in sex education. You socialize public schools, socialize medicine. So you have control over medicine. Okay, what comes next is mass birth control, mass sterilization, all of those things, abortion, because you have to have one social network. And you can't have one over here that says they're pro-life and one over here say, no, they're all for abortion and, you know, partial birth abortion. No, it has to be all compiled into one if you're going to have a one world government. So what we're talking about is having one money, one government. You're going to have one health care, one world order, which means one world religion. Those are the changes in society, and can't we see that now? You can see how Europe has gone to one money. And I was very interested, you know, because I had traveled to Europe before the euro came into being and before the European Union. Well, one money, you know, was a little interesting for me because that's when I started seeing the one world order and the European Union. So it's very interesting how it's all connected, because now you see how one of the countries is falling, another country is falling economically, and another one and another one. They can't stand on their own now. No, you know, and it is a real danger. But you know, this is also part of the whole plot of Freemasonry and the One World Order, is that you have to have an economic collapse, a worldwide economic collapse, in order to build then the foundation of this One World Order. Well,
Mary, now could we have you share your personal experience with us?
Yes. Yeah, it's very interesting because I belong to a very conservative Catholic church, very beautiful. Have orchestral masses. I love music. It's very much a part of my life. And so I would go to these masses. It was a Latin mass with the Minnesota Orchestra. And after one of the masses, a gentleman pulled me by the arm and said, "Oh, would you come to coffee and donuts for me?" And I said, "Well, sure." I mean, he was sitting up in the front pew and he was in a three-piece suit, so I thought, okay, fine, you know. I mean, I was taken off guard. So I was taken down, escorted down to coffee and donuts, sat at a table with a group of mostly men, and there was one other woman. And they started talking, and because of my studies of Mexico and knowing about the Freemasons and the revolutions in the world, key words started popping up. And I looked at them and I said, "Are you Masons?" You know, and I looked at each and every one of them, because then, you know, they started talking about a little blue book and different things. And I went, "Are you Masons?" And they looked at me and they said, "Well, we're only in the first levels." I said, "You can't be a Mason and you can't be Catholic and a Mason. You can't be Christian and be Mason," you know? And they said, "Oh, no, you know," they then spoke about all the good works that, you know, Masonry does, you know, the Shriner Hospital, you know, all the philanthropy, you know, projects and all the money. And I said, "But that's just a smokescreen." And I said, "You butchered and martyred my heroes in Mexico."
Good for you, Mary.
And I said, "This is part of the New Age movement. You know, you are the One World Order. You are behind the One World Order. You are the big businessmen, the bankers, the, you know, the money that is pushing all of this into this crisis that we have." And I said, "You've got to get out of Masonry." I said, "You've got to go to confession. You can't be receiving the sacraments and be Mason." And then they went on to tell me.
They were just stunned that you were saying
well,
this.
I was just so on fire. I couldn't stop.
Right.
And so then they looked at me and they started telling me who in St. Paul, Minneapolis area were Masons, and, you know, just trying to kind of cover it up and make it not look so bad.
Right.
And I said, "I'm not impressed." I said, "This is a diabolical order." I said, "At the very top levels, you have human sacrifice." And so anyways, one of the young men said, oh, I've only been in the level, few years. But I knew as he was talking and as he was defending, I thought, no, this gentleman knows far more about Masonry, and he's been in for a lot longer. And so I knew he was lying, and they do lie to further their cause, sure. So anyways, then I said, well, I'm going to give your names over to the priest here. And you cannot be, coming to Mass, and you can't be receiving the sacraments. And they got a little upset with that. And I said, I'm going to be praying for you. But after that, what happened is that I started getting phone calls one by one from each of these guys. They were trying to wine and dine me to the finest restaurants, to the finest places, trying to court me, because really their ultimate goal was to recruit. That's why they were there. Sure. They were to recruit members. Right. And they knew that, I traveled internationally, and they were kind of interested in the work I was doing and all of that. So I said, no. I refused. Each one I said, no, you don't get it. I said, I will not go out with you. I will not go to dinner until you stop, until you leave the Masonic Lodge. Right. You have to go to confession and get back to the sacraments. There is no relationship. So anyways, then I got a phone call saying, oh, well, Mary Therese, maybe you won't make it to Mass on Sunday. Kind of a general threat. Oh, my. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. It wasn't an outright, but it was kind of a, a hidden meaning behind that, because a lot of people are either, they have fake accidents, that are setups, or they disappear. So I started really thinking about it. I began to get really concerned. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I was very worried about my family. And so I decided, I'm going to go public. I'm going to go down to that Coffee and Donuts, and I'm going to go to every other table down there besides the Masons, and I'm going to tell everybody what the Masons are and who these people are, right there. And that'll put a stop to it. And if anything happens to me, then it just validates. It just validates everything that I'm saying about the Masonic Lodge. That was smart thinking. So I did that, and they stopped coming to Coffee and Donuts for a while. And then eventually, this went on for a year and a half, this kind of struggle. I'd bump into this young man, and I'd say, I'm praying for you that you get out of the lodge. You must get out of the lodge. And then I'd go to the next table, and I'd say, hey. You know what the lodge is? It gave me an opportunity to share my knowledge about the Freemasonry. So anyways, what happened then after about a year and a half, after Mass, I was genuflecting, and this young man actually grabbed me hard by the arm and said, Mary Therese. And I go, I am so sick and tired of this. I said, this has got to stop. I said, we have nothing to discuss until you come back to the sacraments, you go to confession, and you get out of the lodge. And his lips started to quiver. He had tears in his eyes. And he said, that's what I want to talk to you about. He said, I want to thank you for challenging me. He said, for a year and a half, I've never had anybody ever challenge me like you have. He said, I have gone to confession, and I am back to the sacraments. Oh, praise God. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. But I said, you know what? They're going to be after you to come back. And I said, it's not that easy leaving the Masonic Lodge, and especially after the oaths that you took. And I said, you're in danger. And he goes, yes, I know. But he said, I want to tell you, everything that you told us there at the table about diabolical worship, about Satanism, about one world order, about human sacrifice is 100% true. He said, I lied to you. I was not in the first levels of the Masonic Lodge. I have been in for 17 years, and I was their ritual leader. Oh, wow. Yeah, and that's what validated it for me. It was just like, oh my gosh. So, there is hope, for people that have been or that are in the lodge, but you do need to get out. And it takes a lot of prayer. It must. I was going to say, it has to be very frightening to get out, and very, very dangerous. It is very dangerous. And the best thing is never to get involved with the lodge, never to be sucked in, so to speak, to their philanthropy or their sweet talk and brotherhood. Right. And a lot of young people fall for this in fraternities, which is a real danger. Oh, yeah. Yale has a famous fraternity called the Skull and Bones. Yale. And that's a
Yes.
Catholic university, so to
Yes.
speak. And that is Masonic.
Oh,
And many
yeah.
of the people that have been a part of that fraternity, it's a senior year fraternity.
Oh, okay.
Many of those people have gone on to high levels in government and service all over the world.
There's so much we could talk about. We're almost out of
I
time,
know.
and I do want to cover definitely what is the best way to protect our children and our families from this happening. Because I know you've said they
Right.
are recruiting, and
Right,
they're
they're
going
recruiting.
anywhere, anybody, any
Right.
age.
Any age. You've got Daughters of Job. You've got the Rainbow Girls. You have the Demolay group, which is for young men. You have all these other allied associations, Eastern Star. All of these are Masonic off branches. They may not know the diabolical nature of the Masonic Lodge, but they are also, they're a part of it. They help support it financially.
So what do you say is...
you need to educate them in the faith, in the Catholic faith.
Yes, you
Begin
definitely.
the Baltimore Catechism.
Yes.
You know, the Baltimore Catechism can be taught to anybody. It's so simple, and that
It
was the
is.
beauty of that catechism.
That's right.
You know, you're not going to pick up a big catechism and have a theological discussion with your children.
Right.
The beauty of the Baltimore Catechism is that it was so simple and everything was laid out, and children can learn it.
That's right.
You must get back to the basics.
Right.
Stay in the state of grace.
Yes.
You know, and you know, keep your eyes open, and you must speak out courageously. If you know somebody, you must say, no, that is not a good organization,
That's
or
right.
that is not it is a diabolical organization. So
Mary, I just can't thank you enough. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but this has been wonderful. And
Thank you.
We're going to have the show on for a month, and then we'll have it on our website too. So
yes. Oh,
God bless you.
God
Thank
bless
you.
you.
We'll
Thank
keep
you. It was
praying
an
for one
honor.
another.
Thank you.
We hope you'll tell others what you've learned about this dangerous secret society. And if you missed part 1 of this program, you can find it on our website at catholicparents.org. Thanks for watching, and God bless you and yours. What is Freemasonry, and why is their main goal to overthrow the Catholic Church and entire Christian religious and political societies? Stay with us. Catholic Parents Online is next. Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a program where we explore the issues Catholic parents face while raising their children. I'm your host, Colleen Perfect. In this program, Part 3, we will look at how Freemasonry attacks the Catholic Church, the reason why this secret society wants to destroy the source and summit of our faith, the Holy Eucharist, and how we can protect ourselves and our families. Joining me again to help unveil the truth about Freemasonry is Mary Therese Helmueller. Mary is a nurse specializing in critical care, and she is also a certified legal nurse consultant. She is the founder and CEO of Guadalupe Travel Incorporated, providing pilgrimages to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City for the past 25 years. Mary speaks the Spanish language fluently and has worked in the missions of Brazil, Mexico, and Guatemala. I'm very grateful to Mary Therese for her willingness to share her wealth of knowledge on the secret society called Freemasonry. Thank you again for being here, Mary.
Thank you, Colleen. It's a
God
privilege.
bless you for being here.
Thank you
This
for
is a long
asking me.
story, but so important.
It is, yes.
So could you give us a little review of
Right.
what you've talked about in the past 2 shows?
Sure. Freemasonry, basically, its main foundation was in 1717 in a lodge in London, and it is a secret society, international. Their goal, as you said at the introduction of this program, is a one world order. And it is a religion. A lot of people don't realize that it is a religion, and it's a diabolical one at that. Freemasonry, all the Masons are united in their belief of naturalism, which at times is human secularism as well, very similar, in that they reject God's divine sovereignty or power. They actually say that man is the ruler and the judge of all things. So it's almost a form of atheism is what I would say. So they reject God in that way as far as being the judge and ruler of their lives. However, they do use all the different religions as a little hook to bring the men, the women in to their programs, sometimes even children in some of their programs. And so they'll use, if you're Catholic, they'll, quote scripture or use some things in the Catholic faith to draw the men in, or Lutheran or whatever faith it is. And but then in the first 3 levels, what they do is they'll lay the foundation. And what they say is that leave behind all that you've been taught as a child or up until this point as far as your faith, because you are coming out of darkness and into light. Well, we know that Lucifer, his name was light.
That's right.
So this is really what this is all based upon, is Lucifer. So the first 3 levels are called the Blue Lodge, and men can go on higher, and there's 2 different avenues they can choose to take. One would be the York Rite, which follows a different path but leads to the same ultimate goal. We're basically talking about the Scottish Rite, which has the 33 degrees, the highest level being the 33rd degree, which Christ was 33 years old.
Right.
So a lot of what they do in the Freemasonry and the Lodge mocks, pokes fun at the Catholic Church, at the true faith. So their goal is to destroy the Catholic Church, as you said in your introduction, and form a one-world order in which naturalism would be ruling. And so they need one faith, one economic system. That all goes with the one-world order system.
So Mary, can you tell us how and why they're attacking the Catholic Church?
Well, it's very simple. The Catholic Church, we go back to Peter, St. Peter, when Christ said, "On this rock I will establish my church." All the other Christian faiths are offshoots of the Catholic Church. You need to go back into history and you need to study church history. A lot of people don't realize that of other faiths, that basically they were once a part of the Catholic Church, but it's a branch off. So if they studied, let's say, Lutheranism, you come to Luther. Well, what was Luther? Before that, he was Catholic.
That's right.
He was a Catholic priest. So, the roads all lead back to Rome, so to speak.
Yes.
And so this is where the power and where the true presence of Christ exists. Satan knows that. And so this is that battle, that ancient battle between Lucifer, Satan, and God. Satan saying, "I will not serve." And so therefore, really tricking mankind, into being like gods themselves. It's that same temptation in the Garden of Eden.
That's right.
Of our 4 parents, Adam and Eve.
Sin of pride.
The sin of pride, exactly. That is exactly what the battle is all about. So Satan is very clever. He knows that the true presence of Christ, that is the real power. That's the real powerhouse here on earth, and what a privilege it is to have in our tabernacles in the Catholic Church. Now, we believe that is the true presence. The Eucharist is the blood and the body of Christ. Other faiths do not. They say it resembles, it's a symbol. Our faith, we go all the way back to Peter, says it is the true presence of Christ. So it makes sense when you start looking and studying at history that Satan is going to want to attack the true presence of Christ.
That's right.
He's not going to waste his time
No,
anywhere else.
Right.
And to highlight this, even some Catholics will say they don't believe that it's the true presence of Christ. And it's really sad because you can see the Masonic influence within the church in some areas. And in fact, you know, I was really alarmed when my little niece was studying to receive her first communion years ago. And we were just I was going over the Baltimore Catechism, and I was going through different things, and she goes, "You mean that's really Jesus Christ? That's really his body?" And I said, "Yes, it is. It's not a meal. No, it's not a meal." You know, so words really do matter. And the downplaying of the true presence of Christ, unfortunately, is what we have seen, you know, over the last, 50, 60 years in our churches, to a point where our churches have been stripped, you know, and many of them look like auditoriums.
And that's what they hide, is the tabernacle.
Right, and immediately they take the tabernacle out.
Inside.
Exactly. But the tabernacle is the focus. I mean, that is Jesus Christ himself.
That's right.
And so the attack has been on the Eucharist. It has been on the true presence of Christ. Now, people will say, well, you know, how do you know it's the true presence of Christ? Well, you know, the Satanists know it. And I'll share a true story with you. I was in Mexico with a pilgrimage group, and we were in a church. And I had no idea that many of the churches in Mexico, their tabernacles are wired with alarms.
Oh.
For security purposes.
Really?
Yes. I had no idea until this moment. But it was in the church, of the Jesuit church where Padre Pro is buried. And we had just visited the tomb of Padre Pro, and all of a sudden this alarm went off, and I didn't know. It was a huge, very loud, piercing alarm. Didn't really know what was going on. Went into the church, and here was our little 80-year-old priest up on the altar with his cane defending the Eucharist.
Oh my.
People had come in, and they were spitting on the altar, and they were after the Eucharist. And they knew that just shortly before Mass, the priest would come out, put the key in the tabernacle, and the alarm hadn't been deactivated, thank God. But our priest was up there hitting him with this cane.
Oh, that dear man.
And so, and our bus drivers then were professional wrestlers, and I had not known that at the time, but they took on this group of people.
Good.
And it was a wrestling match on the altar.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, the Satanists, the occult people, they all know this is the true presence of Christ. Why don't we act like it is the true presence?
That's right.
Why aren't we dressing like we are going to see the King of Kings?
Yes.
Why aren't we behaving in church like this is the true Christ? This is my maker. This is the creator. And when
It's
the
so
Satanists
sad
know,
how you watch people come back from Holy Communion. They
I
don't
know.
realize what they have
they
taken
don't.
into their bodies.
The treasure that we have in the Catholic Church is something that is hard to even grasp. But the Satanists know it. The Masons know it. And this is why the attack is against the Eucharist and against the priesthood. If you get rid of the priests, you get rid of the Eucharist. So there's, make no mistake about it, a direct correlation.
Right.
So in Mexico, you know, the terrible persecution of the church that we had discussed in our previous show.
Right.
And where the priests were hung on telephone poles, they were shot, they were tortured. If they were caught celebrating Mass, you know, they were just outright murdered.
Right.
But it wasn't only just priests, it was the lay people as well, if they were caught in Mass. So that was the main target. If you destroy the Mass, if you destroy the priesthood and the Blessed Sacrament, that is the basis. That is the true presence of Christ. And so that's where the attack and battle has been. And let me just share with you some things just to highlight. I mean, don't take my word for it. I hope that this spurs people on to study history and to really research this, because it is out there and you will find answers. You have to piece it together, but they are out there. There's information out there.
Like I told you, Mary, since you've been doing the shows, and I've been learning as we go along, now that when I'm on the internet, things will come up and I'll read an article here.
Yeah.
Things make more sense.
It makes a lot more sense.
I understand.
Right.
I'm putting two and two together.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It's there. It's just that you hadn't had the tools
Right.
to identify
Yes.
you know, what you were
knowledge
reading or what you were actually seeing. But let me just share with you some things. In 1917, St. Maximilian Kolbe witnessed the bicentennial celebration of the Freemasons in Rome. They marched in Rome carrying banners depicting Satan defeating St. Michael. Can you imagine?
Oh, my heavens.
And they were shouting, Satan will rule on Vatican Hill and the Pope will serve as his errand boy.
Oh,
I mean, right out there in your face.
Right in public.
In
they're
1917.
They have no fear.
Yeah. No,
Wow.
no shame, no fear.
No shame, no.
So, very interesting, in 1991, an interview with Cardinal Gagnon, he was a member of the church's Curia, said that from his personal experience in Canada, he knew that Masons were stealing consecrated hosts to be used in celebration of Masonic black masses.
Oh.
And in those black masses and in those horrible events, they desecrate the hosts in such vile ways.
Oh.
It's just really, I will not even mention some of what I've heard as far as the ways. It is just very, very gross.
Imagine.
Very gross. But anyways, and then getting back to Mexico, in July of 1992, Mexico's Masonic Grand Master Francisco Valle Guzman condemned the Catholic Church as, quote, the most powerful and ruthless enemy of science, civilization, fraternity, and love. Any reconciliation between us is impossible, unquote. Then he added that Masonry's duty is to be grave diggers of the Catholic Church.
Oh, wow.
1992. Spring of 1993, the Mexican Cardinal Ocampo, he was just stating that the principles and traditional philosophy of the Freemasons makes it clear that they do not act in our favor as far as the people of Mexico. And then he added, because there was a big presidential election taking place in 1994, he said that would be an appropriate occasion for change. Well, for that little bit that he said, he was gunned down at the Guadalajara airport.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, he was assassinated. But the government made it look like he got caught in between drug lords. But when you looked at his vehicle, everything was aimed right at his vehicle. I mean, it was riddled with bullets. He was not caught in between any drug lord, you know. No, it was just riddled. So the people know that he was assassinated because he had spoken out against Freemasonry. So these are recent examples. And
they're not long ago.
Not long ago is right. And so it is very interesting how, you know, they are out to create an indifferentism to the Eucharist. With the Alta Vendita, I spoke about that the last couple of talks. The Alta Vendita was a document that came out in Italy initially in the 1800s, and the two popes wanted it published because it was actually a plan to infiltrate the Catholic Church to bring it down. Well, we know that you know, parts of the Catholic Church have been infiltrated, and we see signs of it. And we were just kind of talking before the show of how the irreverence in many different areas of church life, as far as walking into a church, many churches today, you think you're at a beach. You know, or you were going to a beach.
Are dressed.
Yeah. I mean, halter tops, shorts. You know, you wouldn't think that there were going to see anybody important.
No.
Right?
No.
You would, I think they would go to a rock concert, or they would go to, you know, see a movie star better dressed. And here, this is the King of Kings.
Yeah.
This is the true presence of Christ. So
they don't even know just 2 Sundays ago, our pastor had to tell the usher to go tell a young man to take his baseball hat off. He was sitting like in the second row from the front.
Right.
And I was surprised people around him didn't even say, take your hat off.
Right. So you can see how things have changed over the years, and then even the architecture of churches, how some churches have been stripped, literally stripped inside.
Yes,
you can't tell when you walk in some of those churches whether they're Catholic or what denomination they are, because you have to go find the Eucharist, the tabernacle.
Yes, it's so sad.
But that is a Masonic influence in which it downplays the Eucharist. and indifference, and then you teach other generations, this isn't important. You can come to church in sandals, and you can come to church, I mean, in shorts and beachwear, you know, swimwear, basically, because it really isn't important.
You always hear the argument, as long as you're there, that's all God wants, is that you're there. Come dressed however you want.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
but you do show respect by how you are dressed. Right. You would not go, whether you like President Obama or not, you wouldn't go to see him and his wife at the White House dressed in beachwear.
No.
I mean, it's just common sense.
It is.
So why do you think you can go to church, in a Catholic church, and there you have Christ, the true presence of Christ, and body and blood there. And what a privilege it is. So, you know, it's very interesting, all of that has come about in the last few years, and you can see that influence, that indifferentism, and how it has affected just even our worship in our Catholic Church.
This was all planned, wasn't it, Mary Therese?
Absolutely.
It was all planned for many years ago.
For many years
thousands.
ago.
I mean, just a constant, gradual grading down of...
Right. Well, the Masonic Lodge realized that perhaps it was more important, or it was more effective to infiltrate than it would be to, you know, go ahead and just outright slaughter, you know, priests and religious, because eventually people rise up. And they can see that. It's kind of like the frog that gets thrown into a boiling water, a pot of boiling water. It says, ouch, and it will jump out.
Right.
Okay? But if you put that frog into water and you just gradually turn up the heat, change the heat, that frog will cook.
That's right.
He won't realize
that
the temperature is getting way too hot. And that's basically what has been happening. It's been a slow process. It's been a gradual process, but they're on track. I mean, they've been on track. Now, I've seen over the years, especially in the last few years, that people are starting to catch on, and they're starting to really rise up and fight. And I see a renovation in churches, bringing the beauty back, being restored to what the churches were before, which is beautiful, you know, and music, sacred music, being restored, which is wonderful. And I think that's a step in the right direction, because you do teach by your actions, and you know, other generations have been taught that this is not important Sunday, you know, going to church. It's just a casual experience. It's just a meal. It's another meal. You know, it's not the true presence of Christ. So unfortunately, we've got a lot of teaching to do, you know, with our families. And that's one of the things that we can do, and that we should be doing. But, you know, getting back to Masonry and their different degrees, and this comes off, you can research, but the 32nd degree, which is almost to the top, they're taught Masonry will eventually rule the world. And this is where you get the one world order. And their main publication is called the New Age movement. And I never really knew, never made the connection between the New Age movement, one world order, to Freemasonry. Never made that connection until I studied Mexican history, and until I ran across books, No God Next Door, Mexican Martyrdom, Blood-Drenched Altars. These were all books that were written during the persecution in Mexico, and they were outlawed. In 1991, if you were caught with them on you, you could be thrown in prison in Mexico. So, but in that one book that said No God Next Door, it absolutely said that the New Age movement is the highest level of Freemasonry. So, and that's where I started making all these connections. It was like, really, Freemasonry, how, you know, how does that fit into Mexican history and the persecution? And so I would hope that other people would, you know, go down that path, you know, and do some research on this topic.
Well, especially now. This is so important we're doing these shows now, Mary, because of what's happening in our world now.
Exactly.
I mean, we're on the brink of these things, and it's just this new world order, one world government. Things are really shaping up. It's obvious.
It is very obvious when you finally kind of know the key words. And you
but to expose the enemy, to expose Freemasonry, that's the first thing we need to do, expose the evil.
Exactly. And really what they are about. And so it's very interesting, and people are not really too aware of,
No.
what their whole organization is about. Let me just tell you their 30th degree. This just gives you an idea of some of the things. Okay. The Grand Master approaches the table on which lies 3 skulls. One is adorned with a papal tiara, the next adorned with a regal crown, and the last festooned with a laurel wreath. The Grand Mason stabs the skull bearing the papal tiara as the candidate repeats, "Down with imposture, down with crime." How do you defend something like this? I mean, it is anti-Catholic, to the very top of the levels. And even just the names of the different levels in the Scottish Rite. You have Prince of Mercy. We know who the Prince of Mercy is. He's in the tabernacle of our Catholic churches. He is the true presence of Christ. He's not in the Scottish Rite.
No.
Chief of the tabernacle, Prince of the tabernacle. If it's not a religion, then why are they, why do they have titles like this?
Right.
Why do they have altars in their temples, so to speak? So anyways, it is diabolical, and that is the reason why they are attacking the Catholic Church, because they know where the true presence of Christ is. There is no doubt about it. They know that is Jesus Christ. Satan knows. That's the battle.
So Mary, to finalize our show here, what can we do? What can our families do?
I think, we need to pray.
That's
for sure.
Number one, yes.
Yeah, stay in the state of grace. Stay close to the sacraments. But I really think that we need to get out the Baltimore Catechism with your children. It's something so easy that we all can learn, and that everyone can learn, little on up. Very, very easy. Study the Baltimore Catechism. You can't defend what you don't know.
That's right.
And so you need to know your faith. Take courses on it, do what you need to do, get out there, study it, because it is so rich, and it is such a beautiful faith. It's such a beautiful gift that we have been given, and we'll be judged severely for what we have done with that faith.
Yes.
And have we defended it, at times like this. So I would say study the Baltimore Catechism. The other thing you can do with your children is give them true heroes that they can emulate, the lives of the saints.
That's right.
These heroes on TV, I'm sorry.
No. TV is
It's going to send you down the wrong path. It's going to
That's
send
right.
the kids right down to the wrong path of despair, depression, drug abuse, alcoholism. I mean, isn't the world full of that?
No.
We hear about teens committing suicide, and
That's right. It's terrible.
It's just terrible,
Even the sports heroes, the athletes, they're just not what they used to be.
No, and then also, I mean, I'm not against sports, but everything in its place. But today, parents Sundays is all sports.
Oh, it is.
They're taking their kids
church.
Right, exactly, in place of church. So that teaches the children by example. You know what? Going to the hockey rink on Sunday morning is more important than going to church. They catch that very quickly.
Oh, it's so obvious. Yes.
You don't even have to say a word.
You don't have to. No.
I mean, that
Actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And they catch on that. So really, keep Sunday as a holy day. Keep it as a family day, a holy day for your children. Give them lives of the saints. I mean, like my heroes, Padre Pro. A great example of a hero, one of my Mexican heroes. Little Jose Luis. Beautiful one for children to have, a little 10-year-old, that gave his life for Christ, the King. I just think those are our true heroes.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they have...
And there's such beautiful stories that can be told.
They have persevered in moments of trial and temptation, and that's where really we are defined in our ultimate moments like that, So I really think those are the things that they can do. Really get involved with your children's education. Know what organizations they belong to. Some of the fraternities are not good fraternities. Right. Some even organizations, the Masons have organizations that they go into schools for the girls and for the boys. The Demolay is for the boys. Girls, the Rainbow Girls.
They covered it all.
Get to know, get to know where your money's going. What are you buying? When somebody comes to the door, follow the trail, the money trail. Support the Catholic organizations.
Well, Mary, we have to end. It's just, but thank you so much.
Oh, you are very welcome.
God bless you.
God
This
bless
has been
you.
a wonderful three-part series. And I hope everyone continues to watch it and learns and can really expose the evils.
Thank you.
Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you.
This has been an amazing and revealing three-part series on Freemasonry. We hope you tell others what you've learned about this dangerous secret society. If you missed part 1 and 2 of this program, you can find it on our website at catholicparents.org. Remember, as Catholics, we have the greatest treasure on earth, Christ's true presence in the Holy Eucharist. Thanks for watching, and God bless you and yours.